All right. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining our event today. We are absolutely thrilled to have such a strong interest in our program regarding the crucial role of packaging and ensuring food safety in the packaging industry. We have people from around the world and across the supply chain registered for this event to learn more in food safety and how to manage food safety risks in your own facility, whether that be in manufacturing packaging materials or as a user of those packaging materials. Our digital sponsor, seminar sponsor is Eagle Certification Group, and we appreciate their joining us today for the panel discussion to share their experience. And we're also excited to have an expert from Graphic Packaging International participating on the panel to share their perspective and advice for successful certification. My name is Carrie Allen. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for SQFI. I will be moderating today's panel session, and I'm joined by my colleague, Tammy Van Buren. She is the SQFI Compliance Manager. Tammy will give us the lowdown on the SQF code for packaging manufacturing and her insights into implementing SQF into your own facilities. I'd also like to highlight the Global Business Development Team for SQFI. We have experts in food safety and certification positioned regionally in all major markets to support our customers, CBs, consultants, and trainers, and to ensure your path to certification is fully supported. Our business development team members are happy to take your call to help you on your way. Our team is well versed in food safety and the food safety codes and has extensive industry experience. Between them, we have experienced regulators, retail supplier quality assurance leaders, auditing, consulting, and training experience, organic and natural product certification expertise, and food manufacturing experience. You'll find the team to be an invaluable resource in your certification journey. We'll share their contact information after today's event for your reference. Allow me to give a brief overview of the SQF code for packaging and what is motivating businesses to pursue certification. Today, there is more and more focus on packaging safety from food brands, driven in part by regulatory pressures and consumer awareness. From concern over forever chemicals, the impact of recycled content, food contact hazards, and shelf life, having a trusted certification system in place is a reliable way to measure and manage for continuous improvement and assurance of safety. The SQF program has been in operation since the 1990s and GFSI benchmarked since 2004. The packaging code itself was released as a standalone code customized for the industry, and the code continues to gain recognition and popularity with buyers, particularly in North America and Canada, with 12% growth over the past 3 years. Eagle Certification Group is the leader in SQF packaging certifications issued among our partner CBs. The SQF packaging code has a broad scope to capture the industry needs across all packaging types, from non-food contact packaging, product contact films and other materials, and food service paper and plastic disposable packaging. You can see here just a few examples of the major packaging companies who trust the SQF program for their food safety management certification. Food manufacturers who make their own packaging on site also use the SQF code to provide assurance for their food safety management systems of their packaging products and packaging systems. The SQF code continues to evolve to meet the needs of the industry, and we're excited about the work ongoing for the development of the next edition, edition 10 of the code. Tammy will tell us more about what you can look forward to in the next edition during the panel session. Right now, I'll pass the presentation to Tammy to tell you more about the SQF code's technical requirements and considerations for food safety and packaging materials. Tammy?
Thank you, Carrie. So again, welcome. So happy to see so many of you joining us today. Not just, as Carrie said, packaging manufacturers, but also food manufacturers who may be using packaging coming from certified sites. So if you're not familiar with the SQF code, let me just tell you the rundown on it. So we have module 2, which is system elements. So that's the basis for your management of your entire food safety program. So it talks about management commitment. It's where it identifies what policies and procedures are required. It talks a lot about risk and identifying those hazards. So again, it's just how you're managing, and the basis for your food safety system is found there. Then module 3, that's what we call our GMP or our GIP, good industry practices. In this case, it is good manufacturing practices. And so the focus on module 13 is around facility design and how you maintain that. personnel practices. It's where we talk about hand washing, sanitary conditions, and cleaning and sanitation is covered in Module 13. Equipment, supplies, waste, all those things are incorporated into that good manufacturing practices. I mentioned risk. So the SQF code does require a risk-based approach. So you have to understand your product and where it's going to be used and how it's going to be used. So everything is based on risk. What is the risk to the finished product? It is globally applicable. We get questions quite often about, are you going to add FSMA into the SQF code? Well, no, because FSMA is very specific to a country and people that are supplying into that country. So we would not add it to the code. However, we do identify regulatory expectations in general terms. So you are expected to meet the regulatory requirements of sites of countries where you're manufacturing and when your products are being used. So we are globally applicable. And then accountability. So we build into the code, and with Edition 10, just a little hint, we are going to further emphasize customer expectations and specifications within all of our array of codes that we have. And supplier management is another key aspect. And so we often say we are farm to fork. So wherever you're at in that supply chain, including the packaging sector, you are responsible. One thing I want to highlight here, SQF quality code is near and dear to my heart. So what are some of the benefits? And often these are the ones that people don't necessarily see. Hey, I have a food safety system. I'm certified to the SQF Food Safety Code. So why do I need the quality code? Well, let me share some benefits to you. So the quality code is focused on process and product variation. And so we're looking at that process control and there are requirements within there. I will say we took out statistical process control for Edition 8, I believe it was. But it's all kinds of process control. And that's the reason we took out the word statistical, because we recognize the fact there are lots of ways to control your processes. Validate and monitor critical to quality attributes. So think CCPs for your food safety program. We have CQPs for the quality program. Product claims. So this is where we would audit label claims, and that would fall under the quality code. And overall, just the quality code just makes you better when it comes to productivity, which drives improved process time. It drives reduced scrap. There's just lots of things that you can see benefits from, but a lot of it will hit your profitability. So implementing the quality code, while optional for a lot of people, I just can't stress enough how much we recognize the importance of the quality code. And then those of you that keep asking, you want to use the SQF food safety logo on your packaging, which isn't allowed, you can use the quality code. So there's an opportunity for you to identify to your customers and stand up proud that you are SQF certified is to the quality code and the use of the quality shield. And so, yeah, that kind of stands out different from the food safety. All right, so I want to talk to you a little bit about ISO 9001 versus the SQF code comparison for food packaging. So when I started, I came from a non-food industry, and we dealt very largely with ISO 9001. And so I was very familiar with that. When I got my first job it was actually in food packaging. So I'm very familiar with those expectations. And when I went into that facility, they said, we need you to get us certified to SQF. And I took a look at, again, not having a food background, I took a look at the SQF code, and I went, oh my gosh, I know these things. So if you look at the ISO 9000 requirements versus the SQF requirements, you'll see where it lines up in a lot of places. So it talks about senior site management. It talks about management responsibility. It talks about having a plan. Okay, so it might not be a food safety plan in ISO, but it does talk about having a plan. Document control records has to be there. Talking about product formulation, management review, CAPA is so critical. All those things, as you can see by our little chart here, does line up. And you can see what those key comparisons are. Now, there are some additional requirements. I talked about those GMPs that would be required for SQF, but really the basis of the food safety management system really does align quite largely with ISO 9000. One thing that's not highlighted on here, but it is under the key comparison, is that internal audit. And I think we're going to talk about that later because that's one of the things that I stress to sites that so important. So, and I'm going to throw it back to Carrie and
All right.
let her take it.
Thanks so much, Tammy. Thanks for illuminating the SQF program implementation, how that works, and those special considerations for packaging manufacturers. And for those that are on the call who are looking to achieve certification with SQF for the first time, I will just briefly review the steps for certification. The foundation of success with SQF is to thoroughly understand the code, and you can access it for free on our website, along with many different guidance documents for special topic guidance. Also, check out the Eagle website as well for additional support to get you started. SQF provides multiple avenues for training, either through our licensed training centers or through our Zosi online learning platform for self-paced training. And when you've chosen Eagle as your certification body, they will provide you with a quote for services and a detailed application to confirm all of your operational details. Every designated on-site SQF practitioner, and that is the person responsible for implementation and management of the SQF program compliance. An internal audit, like Tammy mentioned, is required every year and certainly in advance of your first certification audit. Tammy will tell us more about that internal audit later on during the panel session. A gap assessment or pre-assessment is by a third party is an optional step to help identify any remaining concerns prior to certification. And you can learn more about that from Eagle, your certification body of choice. And your CB will work with you to schedule and conduct the audit with your certificate ready to be issued no later than 55 days after the last day of the audit. This provides 30 days to correct nonconformities and additional time for the CB to review and approve the final certification decision. So that's just a quick overview. And like I said, the business development team for SQF is available to set up a meeting, to have a phone call, to talk about how to get started. So please do reach out to us or to your representative at your certification body to help answer any questions on that process. And any questions that come in through the Q&A as well, I will be answering at the end. So please do add those in there to the chat, and we'll make sure to get to your questions. And now that you have a solid picture of the certification process flow, it's time to get into the detailed discussion with our panelists on the importance of food safety management for packaging materials. Allow me to introduce our guests. I'm so excited to have Joe Weiland as an industry award-winning lead auditor with Eagle certification. Joe has decades of industry experience in manufacturing and auditing and won the prestigious SQF Auditor of the Year award in 2022. Patricia Jarman is the food program's technical manager for Eagle certification. And Trish is also an experienced auditor and FSQA leader from the industry. She started her career with Kimberly-Clark as a process chemist and rose through scientific standards and quality roles to her current position with Eagle. Thanks for joining us, Trish. And we're also pleased to welcome Andrew Kodalak, the Senior Quality Manager with Graphic Packaging International, where he has worked for over 25 years in production, quality, and technical service. All for joining us for this panel discussion today. Oops. And I will can stop sharing if you like. Maybe I'll just leave us up there so I can go to the Q&A later. But Joe, I'd like to start with you for an orientation on food safety and packaging. What are the different types of packaging and what are the food safety concerns related to them?
Well, basically, there are three main types of packaging for food products, and they're used to protect the products and make them easier to handle and distribute. Let's talk about primary packaging, the packaging that directly touches the food product. And this is the first thing that the customer sees. It's the package that we care the most about specific to food safety because there's contact. It protects the product from contamination, spoilage, damage, and it's oftentimes referred to as retail packaging. So an example of a primary package might include the bottle of wine or water, the bag of potato chips, the bag inside of a cereal box, or an aluminum pan holding your Marie Callender pie. So when we think of primary packaging, we think of it's touching the actual food product. The next form would be secondary packaging. Secondary packaging is the package that contains a single unit or multiple units of primary packaging. It provides additional protection for the primary packaging and makes it easier to stack and transport the primary packaging and the product within. Examples of secondary packaging include the box that contains the wine bottle, the cereal box that contains the internal bag of Captain Crunch, or the outer package that contains your K-Cup coffee. So that's typically the box you open to get to the primary package to get to the product. The other types of packaging is tertiary packaging. And this is packaging that protects the products during shipping and handling, and includes things like pallets, stretch wraps, and typically larger corrugated shipping containers. As most of you know, there's a tremendous amount of effort going forward with sustainability. Primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging play an important role in the success of brands and the safe arrival of the product itself. And as you are out there, I consider you a packaging professional. We have to consider packaging being made more sustainable through the use of materials that are biodegradable, compostable, or derived from recycled or renewable sources. Sustainability will apply to primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging.
Great. Thank you so much for that explanation of the different types of packaging. Are there certain food safety hazards or concerns or special GMP requirements that you focus on in terms of when you're doing your food safety audit and how people should prepare their food safety plan around the different types of packaging?
Yeah, actually, there's some key GMP requirements that I think need to be considered, and we run across them as we audit. The first, I picked three because I think these are three important ones, and they continue to surface during audits, and that's cleaning and sanitation. Simple and clearly defined methods and responsibility for cleaning of production equipment, handling and storage areas, and staff amenities. And then those pre-op inspections that are well documented for essential areas to ensure that they are clean prior to the start of production, with the validation from someone other than the person doing the cleaning. A second one is personal hygiene and welfare. And this is somewhat of a spinoff since COVID, but it's become somewhat of a best practice. The monitoring of personnel that may be carriers of infectious disease or exhibit signs of a health problem that could present a risk to primary food packaging is not high on the list of many companies. So there's an area of concern as to how they go about finding the individuals or being notified about an individual that may be under the weather that day. And of course, hand washing under personal hygiene and welfare, greater than 20 seconds. I actually time people washing their hands out there, and on average, most folks are washing 10 to 15 seconds when observed during SQF audits. So there's some opportunities for improvement there as well. And the last one I would call out is storage and use of hazardous chemicals and toxic substances. For organizations to do a routine inventory of chemicals, toxic substances, solvents, and cleaning fluids that can contaminate primary food packaging, and recording them on the approved chemical list is important. All too often, we open flammable cabinets and other storage areas and find things that nobody knew existed. Along with that, clearly labeling and identifying containers in the production area with labels that describe the contents and that stay on the bottle. There's another problem, another challenge. And then chemicals that are controlled should be locked. They should be secure and accessible by persons authorized to do so. So some things to think about in your own organizations with regards to what to look for.
Thank you so much, Joe. They're really, really great points. And some of the simplest things like hand washing, one of the most important things out there, and just making it possible for the employees to know what to do, what not to do to prevent a food safety issue. Thank you so much. Tammy, along those lines, question for you. What are the most common SQF nonconformances for packaging manufacturers, and has that changed over time?
Yeah. So I would say that anytime we do a new edition of the code, the top nonconformances change. So in 2021, when we implemented edition 9, there were new requirements around food safety culture. That certainly rose to the top of top nonconformances for everybody, not just food packaging. So when we do change editions, typically we see a change in top nonconformances. But I will say when I compare the top nonconformances for food packaging to just food manufacturing in general, there is a difference. So I tell people for food manufacturing, I see a top 3. So we're seeing food safety plan, we're seeing cleaning and sanitation, and we're seeing pest prevention. So those are the top criticals, the top majors, the top minors. When I look at food packaging, it's not that. When I look at the top 10, well, first of all, we just rarely see a critical nonconformance in food packaging, and that's great. But within the top majors and the top minors, we don't see pest prevention showing up there. We don't see that food safety plan. So I think there are some areas that food packagers do, well, and we just don't see those nonconformances because they have those same requirements, but we just don't see them as often in food packaging. But what struck me as kind of an odd thing out, the number 1 major nonconformance for food packaging was traceability. And so there's been a lot of talk about traceability. There's a lot more talk about traceability. And probably if you are in a food manufacturing facility and you're listening to us today, that is one of the areas where we see nonconformances for food manufacturing, and that's traceability of their packaging. They often forget to do that. So I think we just think that maybe traceability is not as important. So we kind of lose that for food packaging. But if I could tell you, what's one thing you need to focus on, I would say traceability would probably hit the top of the list. Cleaning and sanitation a little bit does make the list for both minors and majors, but they're certainly not at the top of the top 10 list. So cleaning and sanitation is another area I would encourage you to look at. And then again, internal audit showed up as the number 2 major on the list. And so definitely need to look at that internal audit for sure.
Wow, very good point. I can't wait to talk more about it too, because it is such a key foundational element of a good food safety program. But before we get to that, I was going to ask you about the next edition of the SQF code. How is that evolving to meet the changing industry? And what should people look out for and be prepared for?
So we are busy at SQFI writing the new code. And, I know it just feels like we had a new code, but honestly, edition 9 was published in October of 2020. So can you believe it's been 4 years since we published the code? Implementation was May of 2021. So by the time we get edition 10 written, out for public comment, updated with all your wonderful comments, and I strongly encourage you to please comment when we do post for public comment, probably sometime in the first quarter of 2025. We'll give you 30 days to get that information in. We've got a great new commenting system online, so it's going to make it very painless to be able to put your comments in. And so I just encourage you to do that when that's open. So if you're subscribed to our our monthly newsletter. I'm sure we will announce that in that, so you can be sure and go in. But some of the things that we're looking for edition 10 is we're going to kind of, first of all, standardize some verbiage between all of the codes. So those of you that are food packaging, manufacturing, and maybe you have food manufacturing as well, that there's just some slight verbiage changes for things like food safety policy. That's the same whether you're food manufacturing or food packaging manufacturing. So we're going to standardize some of that, so it makes it a little bit more easy for you guys to, implement and meet your requirements, but only where it makes sense, because there are some things that food packaging is unique, and we're not going to align it with food manufacturing or change that verbiage because it needs to be some unique qualities to it. One of the other things, GFSI has proposed adding change management. So I say change management already there. It's just kind of hidden. So it's already in the code, but we kind of mix it in with where we talk about R&D and new products. So everybody misses the fact that that's also talking about changes. So new piece of equipment, new process, new supplier. That's all covered already in the code, but we're going to highlight that a little bit more because GFSI says it needs to be there. Part A is getting an overhaul. And if you're going, what's part A, Tammy? I encourage you to look it up because there's a lot of great information in there that you need. But scoring is going to be a big change for edition 10. And so I would strongly encourage you to, again, public comments, get them in. And then glossary. I know that seems like such a small thing, but the glossary working group is doing a phenomenal job of adding words that we need to have. So those are my highlights for edition 10. There's more to come in, first part of 2025.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of people sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for that to come out. And I know that the working group around packaging is extremely enthusiastic. So we've got some great experts in there. So if you want to weigh in on the edition 10, make sure you get in there on that public comment and be part of the conversation. Thank you. Joe, back to you. So talking about, Tammy earlier mentioned about FSMA and how it's not specifically mentioned in the SQF code, but absolutely regulatory requirements are covered during an SQF certification audit. So can you tell us how the SQF code addresses regulatory expectations like FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, which applies to packaging as well as food? What are those key elements that need to look for?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. FSMA and food packaging in general, subpart C, the requirements for hazard analysis, risk-based preventive controls, and G, the requirements for a supply chain program, and the FSMA current good manufacturing practices. They apply more to a facility that's required to register with FDA as a food facility. For the purposes of SQF registration, direct food contact structures are not considered food. So primary packaging is not considered food, and therefore primary packaging does not trigger the requirement to register with FDA as covered in 21 CFR 1.227. However, other activities such as placing the food in the package would require registration and be subject to subpart C and G unless an exemption applies. However, there is some overlap between FSMA and SQF packaging code that aligns several of the requirements. I pulled a couple up here for you as examples. Let's look at the food safety plan. The FSMA requirements for hazard analysis and hazard analysis and risk-based controls is reflected in the SQF clauses 2.4, the food safety system, 242, good manufacturing practices, and 243, the food safety plan. Now, we all know the HACCP plan and SQF is focused on chemical, physical, and biological risks on packaging, and the mitigation plan that minimizes or eliminates those risks. FSMA takes it another step further by requiring that preventive controls be in place that assist with the mitigation strategy. So the more mature SQF programs can look at FSMA to further enhance their existing hazard analysis with preventive controls, and it can only strengthen their primary packaging program. Let's move to packaging materials. FSMA requires food packaging manufacturers to follow current good manufacturing practices, or CGMPs, and to use food-grade materials in their food contact packages. Now, this is addressed in SQF with letters of guarantee, and it's further expanded upon in SQF clauses 2.3 specifications, formulations, realization, and supplier approval. In the package design product development arena, FSMA requires that packages must protect the food from contamination and comply with labeling requirements. This means that packaging design must include the required labels for allergen ingredients and bioengineered food. This is the overlap here is captured in SQF specific to, again, specifications, formulations, realizations, and supplier approval. And one I stumbled across that I didn't realize was recall authority. FSMA gives the FDA the power to issue mandatory recalls for all food products and food packaging. In SQF, this overlaps with the requirements stated in 263, product withdrawal and recall, where a requirement exists for communication and notification of customers, legal, regulatory, and experts. It's a mandatory requirement. So if your facility is producing packaging and filling that packaging with food, you are a candidate for FSMA registration in accordance with FDA regulatory requirements. If producing only packaging, then formally addressing FSMA is not going to be a requirement.
Thanks so much for all that detail. And there's so many expectations that are kind of woven together and maybe hard to pick up. So I really appreciate you pointing out some of those highlights. I've got some questions for Andrew now from Graphic Packaging International. And Andrew, I was going to ask you about how regulatory expectations relate to you from as an organization that is, making product that is used in the US, but also outside the US. But then something else I just thought about was different state level requirements that are coming out. And so you can sort of think about the use of different packaging requirements in different states in the US, also adding another factor of complication. So what do you have to share with us about that? How do you help conform with all those various expectations? How does SQF help you with that?
Well, well, I would say, with the different regulations, most of the requirements sort of come from our customers, with being the food manufacturers who have to, they have to adhere to those kinds of regulations as well. So, SQF sets us up to be able to meet those regulations that they're required. One of the main ones being, the good manufacturing practices that Joe just talked about. So the recall, the HACCP requirements, a lot of those are requirements from our customers that that they have, and regardless of where they are within the state, they set us, SQF sets us up for those to meet those regulations.
Great, thank you. That's good to know. And so when you were getting ready to implement SQF at your facilities, was it an easy fit? Was your system already a good match? Were there a lot of overlaps already, or did you have to change a lot?
Well, I mean, there was some changes. It fits nicely with our own customers, requirements for quality and food safety. So, as far as the implementation of it, it wasn't too much of a stretch in many of our facilities. We started our journey almost 14 years ago. I think in 2010 is when we had our first plants, and we've got, I think, around 50 in North America now that are certified. So it's been a long journey for us, and we've learned along the way, but it definitely, it fits nicely with our customer requirements, and in many ways they mirror the SQF standards. When we implemented it, there wasn't, it's a lot of learning at first. As far as the changes go, I wouldn't say there was any big changes, but maybe a lot of minor changes. If you have a facility that's sort of newer, it's easier. If you have a facility that's older, you may have some challenges with access to facilities like hand washing and that kind of thing. You may have to maneuver around. But as far as the implementation of it, it was a lot of minor changes as opposed to big major changes.
if you were doing it over again, or were to give advice to somebody who's just getting started, what would you be your biggest advice to somebody to accelerate their process to success there?
A couple of things. Learn the requirements. Tammy mentioned Part A. Learn Part A. You need that, especially when you're implementing. Yeah, that sets all the expectations for what the code is, and then of course Part 2 and then 13 are the actual standards. But Part A is going to be very important when you're learning. And then the big thing is getting commitment from your leadership. You have to have your buy-in from your site leadership and even above, because you're going to need a team and you're going to need resources in order to get things implemented. So to have leadership understand and educate them the scope of the support that you're going to need from the different teams. You're going to have your HACCP team and your food defense team and business continuity team, all these different things that you're going to need to put in place. What are the training requirements required for yourself and your teams? The time resources that are going to be needed throughout the year. And as an SQF practitioner, this is not something that you just do a week before the audit. This is a year-long thing. So you have to have, time commitments and then the resource to do that. There's daily maintenance of the system. And, if you're going to need any funds, so if you do have to make any changes in your facility to meet some of the requirements, there may be some funds needed. So what you're having understanding of that, and then your facility upkeep. One of the things that is also helpful is if you're in a situation where, especially in packaging facilities, you may have, say, a quality manager that is also your SQF practitioner. I would recommend splitting up that responsibility. The SQF practitioner should be someone different, because what happens is if you have in a situation where the quality manager may leave the facility, get promoted, go on to a different position, then you've also lost your SQF practitioner. So when you bring somebody on, not only do they have to learn the position that they were hired for, but then they also have to learn SQF and all of that. So I would recommend as well to split those responsibilities up among your staff.
Yeah, maybe the quality manager can be the backup that's also required.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you. So, planning ahead to avoid food safety issues, that's at the heart of preparing a SQF food safety system and maintaining it all the time. Do you have any examples of how SQF helped your company avoid a costly situation?
It's hard to say that SQF, that there was a situation that we avoided because of SQF. But what I can say is it's the situations that we don't know we avoided because of SQF. So just the enhancement of all the food safety practices that help, prevent a lot of the costly situations that could happen, like say foreign material control, right? So we have, there's a section in there about controlling foreign materials. So, avoiding those kinds of things, supplier management, making mistakes or not having the right materials because of your supplier management issues. So it's those kinds of things that we put in place that have helped us control our processes that have resulted in avoiding costly mistakes. Traceability, probably a more direct result maybe around that we can associate with avoiding costly mistakes might be around traceability and recall requirements. And so when there is an issue and we need to know quickly how much material is impacted, that exercise alone has helped streamline our traceability process. And, in some cases, it could take days or even a week or so, down to just minutes in some cases. So we can get our, traceability, pretty quickly. And that's helped us avoid, some costly issues whenever a customer calls and says, hey, we've had something going on here and we need you to look into it. That traceability process alone, once you get that, those exercises under your belt, really helps.
Yeah, just the time savings of being prepared,
Mm-hmm.
just that alone. So you're not scrambling and people running around trying to figure out what the process is. Like, what do we do now? So that's great. And, along those lines, Tammy, here's the question about internal audits. Speaking of preparation, what is the internal audit? How does that help with this we were just discussing? What's the value of it?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, internal audit shows up as number 2 on the major nonconformance list for food packaging. And what we see from a typical nonconformance is that sites are not getting a good grasp of what an internal audit is. So I kind of liken it to a mini SQF audit. So you need to put on your SQF external auditor hat, and you need to act like the SQF auditor. So be like Joe. So you're going to take the SQF code and you're going to audit just like Joe audits. You're going to interview people, you're going to look at records, you're going to observe processes. So be like Joe and be an auditor. And the requirement is that you have to audit every part of the SQF code. And that's where sites miss out. So they're really great. You guys are great at doing facility inspections. You do monthly GMP audits like nobody's business. So it's that management piece of it. So you didn't audit management commitment. You didn't audit management review. You didn't audit food safety culture as a part of your internal audit. So strongly suggest that you do a proper internal audit, because we have data, and I'm all about the data. So looking at the numbers, the site that scores a minor nonconformance in internal audit, on average, even though a minor is only 1 point, on average, they score 5 points lower than a site that didn't get a minor in internal audit. And for those sites that get a major nonconformance in internal audit, they score on average, a major's 5 points, but they score on average 25 points lower than a site that didn't get a nonconformance in internal audit. So the idea behind the internal audit is you find the problems before Joe comes knocking on your door and he finds the problems. So strongly encourage you, you're supposed to use a checklist of some sort to make sure you cover everything. Joe, I see you unmuted. I know you got something to add.
No, not really. I think internal auditors have such a great opportunity because they're there every day. They know the processes in and out. They know where the failures occur. The Gemble walkthroughs, the management walkthroughs, whatever you want to call them, along with the departments auditing themselves, which I see in various locations, are all healthy exercises. And what it really does is it enhances the food safety culture of the organization. And that's really where we want everything to go.
Yeah, just that confidence level that you have going into the certification audit. If you've got a strong internal audit program, you know you've shored up all the areas that you found, you've got a strong system every day. It's a lot nicer to go into a certification audit feeling that level of confidence than otherwise. So, okay, so I've got some questions for Trish. Thank you so much, Tammy and Joe and Andrew. I'm going to move into some questions sort of about the certification process in general to help shed some light on that for people who are attending who may not know the details about that. So Trish, just how does the auditor prepare for the certification audit, and how are unannounced audits handled?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So pretty much when the site gets ready and has chosen their certification body, it's a work between the site and the certification body to define the date of the audit, especially for the initial certification audit. So at Eagle, the certification manager are actually responsible to help the site and support the site and manage the whole certification process. And the certification manager are responsible also to make sure that they are assigning the audit to a qualified auditor. When the auditor has been chosen and the audit is scheduled in the system, confirmed with the auditor, then at that point, the auditor have access to all the things that they need to look at to prepare for the audit, right? So they need to manage their workload. So the first thing as an auditor, you want to make sure that you get familiar with the area where the site is located. So it's possible that the auditor would reach out to the site. Just recommendation could be for hotels or things like that. And then the auditor also have access to what we call the audit info packet. And that audit info packet include the previous year audit report. If it's a recertification audit, they will have the list of the nonconformance. the corrective action plan that were approved from the previous year. They have a copy of the SQF certificate, and they have all the documents that they need to actually complete the audit. So the auditor is really responsible actually to review that packet, to get familiar, because one of the responsibility that the auditor has is not only to complete the audit, but also to verify the implementation and effectiveness of the corrective action that the site would have implemented from the previous audit. So that's one of the things they have to do. The auditor is also responsible to prepare the audit schedule. And if it is announced audit, they have to share that with the site. So at Eagle, what we have is we require the auditor to share that audit schedule with the site at least 30 days in advance. And I think it's important because it gives the site the information of the start time, end time for each of the audit days, but also the program that the auditor is going to review each day. And that's important because it provides the site the opportunity to actually make sure everybody is on the same page, that the employees or supervisor or manager that are responsible for the program that will be audited are aware of when they might be pulled into the audit. So that's important. If it's an unannounced audit, obviously the schedule is not shared in advance, but the auditor will have the responsibility to share the audit schedule upon their arrival at the site. So as far as unannounced audits, it is a requirement for the certification body to conduct unannounced audit of a site at least once every 3 years. So the first 3-year cycle will start with your initial certification date. And those unannounced audits, they have to be scheduled and they have to be completed within what we call the 60 days window of your initial certification date, which is plus or minus 30 days of the certification date. The audit date will be scheduled, they will be confirmed with the auditor, but the site will not be aware, obviously, of the exact date of the audit, but they will know that it will take place within that 60 days window. Site is responsible to provide the CB with blackout date for unannounced audit, and blackout days are really dates where the site knows they won't have production. So as we're getting closer to the holidays and Thanksgiving, for example, if the site knows that the week of Thanksgiving production is going to be shut down, or if they do have scheduled maintenance twice a year for a certain period of day, and those are within the 60 days window, then the site is responsible to provide those dates at least 60 days in advance to the CB. Unannounced audit have to be on site. Remote activity auditing cannot be done for an announced audit. And just a reminder that if you refuse the entry or access to your site to the auditor for an announced audit, then the certification body is required to suspend your certificate immediately. So these are how unannounced audit are pretty much scheduled and handled.
Yeah, and there is an option for sites to voluntarily do unannounced every year. That's our Select Site program. And so, I'm going to pivot a little bit from the questions that we had prepared, just because I'd like to just emphasize, like, how is it important for food safety that we do an unannounced audit? How is that relevant to food safety? What's the value of the unannounced audit for the customer, for the site, for the auditor, for the CB?
Well, I think as you committed to food safety, you should be audit ready 365 days a year, right? So I think it was Andrew that pointed out that don't start to get ready or prepare 30 days before that audit day. It's important that you are ready and all your programs are implemented and followed, throughout the year. So you shouldn't be surprised, like during an unannounced audit, and Tammy can confirm, I don't think we've seen a huge difference in score or number of non-conformance between announced and unannounced audits. So I think when you are implemented a certification such as SQF, it's something that needs to be implemented, maintained every day. So, you know, that's,
Yeah, I think that's where the really strong internal audit program again weighs in with
yes,
having that
very
confidence
important.
level. So
Yes, definitely.
yeah. A question for Andrew. So sort of the question about sort of after the audit, when you have all your nonconformances to deal with, because the auditor is likely going to find things, even if you have what you feel is a perfect system, the auditor's job is to help you improve by finding those gaps and where you can make changes to continuously improve. So what do you find to be are the biggest challenges in responding to audit findings and addressing those nonconformances?
Well, I mean, we treat all the nonconformances or any of the audit findings like any other nonconformance we would get, whether it's from a customer or even internally, like a safety concern. I mean, we follow our standard root cause analysis and preventive and corrective actions to get to the to the issue and resolve it. We've got pretty robust safety programs in our plant, and so whenever we have safety issues, we kind of follow the same process. So, audit findings to us, they are treated just like any other nonconformance. So I don't know that there's a challenge other than occasionally they'll come back and say, hey, we need more information. The auditor might want more, and then we just provide them what they need. But I don't know that it's so much of a challenge as it is just the process you have to follow.
Yeah. And what are some good tips for helping reinforce the importance of the food safety system in a packaging environment, manufacturing environment? How do you keep your crew on task and committed?
Well, like I said about the leadership, you got to have your consistent actions and consistent messaging, and it's got to come from your leadership. It's got to come from the senior actions on the floor. Yeah, that it's not just another program that has to be done once a year. It's your consistent actions. The other thing that could help is just have a roadmap of activities. Like I said, there's a lot of things that have to be done throughout the year. So pace yourself. Do a couple things a month. And make yourself a roadmap to get them all completed.
Yeah. Great, thank you. There's a question in the chat that I wanted to get to. We have a few, and we just have about 8 minutes left here. So I wanted to go to some of those questions in the chat, but I'm going to link it to another question I had for Trish. So in the situation where there's a recall and packaging manufacturers may have a recall, one of the questions is, let's see, where is that? Well, it was the required recall for packaging material. So if the FDA says you must,
I can read the question for you
oh,
if
thank
you'd
you,
like.
Tammy.
So
Thank you.
yeah,
Got lost in
so
the
so are packaging suppliers required to issue a recall if they find an issue with the packaging? So what's that process, I think?
Yeah. So that question, and then linked to that question, if there is a recall, then what happens with the CB? What does the CB do about it? Maybe Trish.
So the first thing you have to remember, and it's a requirement from the standard, if you are part of the recall, even if it's at a supplier and you being affected, or you do a recall of your product, the first thing and most important thing is you need to notify in writing within 24 hours of issuing that recall. You need to notify your certification body and SQFI, right? Both of those need to be notified. On the CB side, I can tell you a little bit about how EGLE handle recall. We manage all the recall in our internal portal, so we do follow up. We want to make sure that we actually acknowledge the notification of the recall. We want to make sure that SQF is on copy of the communication we have, so they can follow up and see how we handle responsibilities such as making sure we get root cause corrective action and things like that. And then, depending on the gravity of the recall, the CB might actually decide to suspend the certificate, so if root cause corrective action are not provided on time, we could suspend the certificate, and eventually a certificate, could be withdrawn depending again on how the gravity of the incident and the recall.
Thank you, Patricia. A couple other questions that we have, going back to the regulatory questions. Do you foresee FSMA applying to packaging suppliers in the future? And is there an industry discussion about this? I think Joe talked a little bit about the overlap in those areas that do apply, that are relevant to packaging manufacturers. But Joe, what do you know about any potential future related to regulatory and packaging?
The only thing I've seen thus far is the FDA modernization efforts for establishing a unified human foods program. The new model for the field operations is changing. Again, in preparing for this webinar, I went back and I looked at the FDA site and learned that on October 1st of this year, the FDA began to implement a reorganization impacting many parts of the agency. They're in a process of updating the FDA.gov content to reflect those changes. So the FDA restructured and renamed their field operations unit to focus on inspections, investigations, and imports as its core mission. The reorganization of the Office of Inspections and Investigations, or OII, previously known as the Office of Regulatory Affairs, will now extend beyond foods and has an impact on how FDA oversees all FDA regulated products. So those of you that are either SQF certified or thinking about SQF certification need to remain close to 2.4.1, which is food legislation in the SQF, because if something does come through relative to FSMA and or FDA modernization effort, we're going to have to be prepared to be sensitive to whatever changes. But I haven't seen anything documented as of yet that says they're going to marry FSMA and FDA requirements with food packaging at this point.
Okay. And Tammy, some questions about edition 10, like Joe was referring to, it's in there, it's in the code, but are we going to specifically say anything about state regulations or specific regulatory requirements anywhere, or is it just more as a general reference that those things will be evaluated?
So for edition 10, it'll continue to be a general reference that you have to meet regulatory requirements, because the regulatory landscape changes all the time. So we would not specify state versus federal. It's just any regulations that apply. And what we train our auditors is that they need to ask that question: what regulatory requirements are you held to? And you as a site should know that answer. So so you would have to meet all regulatory requirements. I think there was one more question, wasn't there, for edition 10 in the chat?
About cybersecurity, I think.
Cybersecurity. So yeah, so right now, GFSI, we kind of thought they would add cybersecurity into their requirements. We didn't see it. However, what I envision SQF doing is adding it maybe as an example, as a part of your crisis management program, or as a part of your food defense program, that is a potential known hazard, because for some people that's not a hazard. You know, if you work in a facility where you don't link up to anything that could create a cybersecurity issue, then obviously you wouldn't have to consider that. So, you know, we may mention it as an example, you know, crisis management, such as weather events, cybersecurity attacks, things like that. And it does, you know, currently mention computer outage, which, you know, so that's the way I would see it listed.
Okay, great. And I think there's so many things that could be put in that, you know, potential for crises, whether it's like extreme weather events, cybersecurity, other things. So really great point.
And we did have a couple of packaging companies that were hit with cyber attacks, and ransomware attacks that did shut down their operations. So it is a very real consideration that you should be considering if you're linked outside of your, you know, own world there, going out to the big wide internet. You need to consider that. So so yeah.
Yeah, and those supply chain disruptions that can happen with suppliers who might have an attack.
Absolutely.
And then what do you do for alternate packaging or whatever else, other ingredients? So Great.
Yep.
Good stuff. Thank you. So just to close out, I'm going to ask Andrew just another question about your experience with certification. So, there's lots of benefits and advantages to certification, but if I were to ask your crew at Graphic Packaging International, the people who are responsible for all the activities day to day that really feed into maintaining compliance, what would they say has been the best thing about having gotten certified?
Well, I think there's a sense of pride in knowing that all the packages that we ship are produced in a clean, food safe environment. And, they'd be comfortable serving their products to their family. So it gives them, a sense of accomplishment, that, hey, I'm proud to be able to, manufacture this product and serve it to my family. And I think that's about, probably.
Yeah. We have a lot of really proud certified sites, and we love to see that when we talk to our customers who have just announced their new certification or recertification. The work of the practitioners is so important, often a thankless job, but we thank you because we know what an important job it is. And so we always want to reiterate that getting a certification audit is a tough experience sometimes, but it's there to make us all safe, make all your consumers safe, and it really does bring that sense of pride to your job that you do every day. So thank you all so much for participating on this panel discussion. And for all of you in the audience, if we didn't get to a question in the chat, we'll definitely follow up and make sure we answer it. But for now, we'll say adieu. Hey, thanks a lot.